Hello and welcome fellow AP macroeconomists to my Pecha Kuka presentation on fiscal policy. Let's begin by defining fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the use of expenditure or revenue collection by the government to influence the economy. The overall goal of fiscal policy is to stabilize economic growth. Fiscal policy can be utilized in one of two ways, expansionary or contractionary policy. These policies are not mutually exclusive, and can both be used at the same given time effectively. Expansionary policy is when the government expands by increasing government spending and lowering taxes. This technique is used during a recessionary gap, or when quantity real GDP is below equilibrium. When using an expansionary policy, the government seeks to increase aggregate demand. For example, lowering taxes will mean that consumers will have more money to spend, thereby increasing demand. Contractionary policy is when the government contracts, by decreasing government spending and raising taxes. This technique is used to combat inflation, or when price levels are above equilibrium. When using a contractionary policy, the government seeks to decrease aggregate demand. By lowering government spending, it is directly decreasing GDP. Quantity real GDP is directly correlated with employment, and can be used interchangeably, just as price level and inflation are related. In the case of stagflation, when inflation is high and unemployment is high, the government can decide between a contractionary or expansionary policy. If the government chooses to use an expansionary policy, which shifts the SRAD curve to the right, it will sacrifice lower price levels to fight unemployment. However, if the government chooses to use a contractionary policy, which shifts the SRAD curve to the left, it will sacrifice dealing with unemployment to fight inflation. When the government lowers taxes and increases spending, it is potentially creating a budget deficit. This means that the government has to borrow money to pay for its spending. When the government raises taxes and decreases spending, it is potentially creating a budget surplus. This budget surplus can be used to pay off the country's accumulated debt. Choosing between fighting inflation and unemployment is a matter of personal preference and value. Depending on the given circumstances, the government may want to choose one over the other. The government has tools in place to automatically deal with recessions or inflation. These are called automatic stabilizers. Example would include welfare benefits and food stamps for those affected by a downturn in the economy. When the government has to pass new laws or enact new policies to fight a recession or inflation, it is called discretionary fiscal policy. An example of this is the Economic Stimulus Act passed in 2008.